Hello, everyone, and welcome. I'm Kelly King, Senior Product Marketing Manager here at LaunchDarkly, and I'll be your host for today's session. We're here because we love building, we love shipping, and we love being at the bleeding edge of technology, constantly refining the digital systems that power how we live, work, and play. For most of us, release day isn't that glamorous, it's just part of the job. But it's the moment everything that we've built finally meets the real world. And if we're being honest, it's also the moment where things can possibly go wrong. For as long as we've been shipping software, release day has carried a mix of pride and maybe a little bit of panic. And according to new research from Harvard Business Review, more than half of organizations experience software release errors every single month, while only 6% can detect them in real time. That gap between speed and stability, between change and control, is what today is all about. To help us unpack that, I'm thrilled to be joined by three incredible voices. James Governor, co-founder of Red Monk, who's been studying the cultural side of software delivery for decades and will help us unpack why developers still ship with their fingers crossed. He's also the co-author of the upcoming book, Progressive Delivery, Building the Right Thing for the Right People at the Right Time, which explores how modern teams balance innovation with stability. And we'll be met by J.R. Robinson, Senior Director of Infrastructure at Writer, the generative AI platform built for enterprises that helps teams create on-brand content safely and securely. JR brings a practitioner's perspective on why observability has become the new standard for release confidence. And then finally, our very own Jay Kotchery, head of LaunchDarkly's Observability, who will take us inside the product to show how guarded releases and Vega, our latest, will make self-healing software real. Together, we'll look at how this shift from reactive firefighting to proactive release safety changes not only how we build, but how we think about building. And because we're builders, well, we like to explore. So before we jump into today's conversations, I want to make sure that you know there's a whole world of resources tucked behind this session. Videos, guides, and stories from the teams who've been putting guarded releases to work. Think of it as the release safety companion kit, everything that you'll want to dig into once that adrenaline rush of today's demo wears off. Inside the media icon, you'll find things like the metrics-driven guarded releases guide to help you tie engineering metrics to business outcomes. Our Downtime Ends Here video series featuring our very own Sinesh Sarana, exploring why engineering safety nets are no longer optional. And a few of my favorite reads from the End of Downtime series on how teams are redefining reliability culture. We're going to talk a lot today about how to ship safely and sleep soundly, but don't sleep on these drops. They're packed with insight, proof, and the kind of stories that make the technical human again. Save them for after the session or cue them up for your next coffee break, but definitely give them a look. Now, here's how we're going to spend the next 40 minutes or so together. We'll talk with a fireside chat featuring James Governor from Red Monk, J.R. Robinson from Writer, and Jay Kotchery from LaunchDarkly, talking about the cultural, practical, and technical sides of release observability. Then we'll move into a live product demo to show what modern observability actually looks like in action. No slides, just product and real data. After that, you'll get a first look at Vega, our new AI observability agent that investigates, explains, and even proposes fixes right at the point of release. And finally, we'll close with some live Q&A. We'll stay honest on time, but if we can't get to every single question, we always follow up one-to-one because we never leave you hanging. We also like to keep things pretty interactive here, so don't be surprised if I throw a quick poll your way, like, would you rather encounter bear on a hike or a 2 a.m. PagerDuty meltdown? We'll see which kind of chaos this crowd prefers. You're going to hear from some truly brilliant minds today and see how observability at the point of release lets teams move fast without losing sleep. Now, you've heard enough from me. Let's dive into the real stuff. I want to start with James Governor from Red Monk. He's been tracking the heartbeat of developer culture for years and knows exactly why we keep living on the edge when it comes to shipping. James, what's your take? Why are we still living that release anxiety life in 2025?
I think it's a great question. The truth is, this stuff is hard. We had a big outage this week from a company that is famous for not having outages. So, you know, we have some challenges to face. Now, what I would say is I think there's a heuristic here. There are a lot of organizations, and it's a well-known meme, like, don't ship on a Friday. People are like, whatever you do, don't ship on a Friday. If you do that, you're not going to be able to, well, hopefully, after work, maybe go for a drink or a cocktail. And as of the theme of this webinar, be able to sleep safely. But are we really going to say to ourselves that we're going to have a whole day of the week when we cannot ship to production?
No.
And I think that's as I say, a heuristic. What we need to be able to do, and this is really the basis of the work that I've been doing in this book that's coming up around progressive delivery, is that set of disciplines that gives us the psychological confidence that actually we can ship at any time. Now, some of this is really the motherhood and apple pie. Of course, we're going to be doing extensive testing. CI/CD doesn't go away. You need to be doing end-to-end testing. You need to be thinking about performance testing. Testing is extremely important. You want to be doing things like dark launches. You want to be thinking about testing in production. Because at the end of the day, there are these disciplines, canarying, blue-green deployments, that enable you to do more experimentation, which is increasingly important in sort of era of AI when generating the code is certainly not the bottleneck. But you need to pull all of that together. And I think what is really exciting to me as an inflection point is, of course, that shipping on a Friday it's a culture change. It requires that the organization has a culture of psychological safety, that it knows that things will go wrong, and it's how you deal with that and make sure it doesn't happen again in future that is most important. So there are a whole set of disciplines in order to be able and confident to ship at any time of the week. Why not ship on Saturday, on Sunday too, if the spirit takes you? But as with any cultural change, you need platforms to support that. And one of the things that I think is most exciting to me is that we've gone from feature flags, which clearly observability could be a useful part of that, because what are you going to do with the dark launch? You need to observe the system, right? What if something goes wrong? You need to observe the system. You need to be able to troubleshoot the system. And that's why observability is so important. But I think the absolute critical issue here is, in order to have a culture change, you need to have a platform to underpin that. Progressive delivery, as I see it at the moment, and why I'm so excited, is what we're seeing is a coming together of release management, of feature flags, of these technologies with observability. And I think that is one of the things that's going to enable people to relax and ship on a Friday as an organization to feel confident to do that. Now, I think what's interesting for me, and I'm going to hand over to JR here, is tell me a bit about this, because I think your perspective is very much focused on observability. So tell me a bit about the journey that you've been on and how you can build that organizational confidence.
Well, at Ryder, we couldn't afford to give up Fridays, so we've never had a don't ship on Friday rule. And easy rollback and observability and a high degree of tolerance for hearing from customers about bugs is sort of what works for that. We're a distributed team, so we have engineers who work Thursday through Saturday. So we also deploy on weekends. We already deploy kind of around the clock in small little bite-sized pieces. And my one rule is never page me awake at night. I hate it. And so, and there are two things I do to achieve that. One is I overbuild like mad. 3 is the smallest number I know. But the other thing comes back to what we're talking about here, observability. I need to know always what's happening on my production platform, and I need to know immediately when changes to that production platform are anomalous, because any anomalous change is potentially a customer-facing bug. And I hate nothing more than we have a lot of big customers and they pay us a lot of money. And so when we do something that they can see, I don't like hearing about it from the CEO, who will call the CTO, who will call me. And then everybody's hair is on fire. And that's not the best way to solve problems, but problems that you're solving that way absolutely have to be solved absolutely right away. We were in a meeting with all of engineering leadership, and somebody was running through a demo, and the site started responding slowly in a place it should not have been slow. And this was with the CTO in the room and the CEO, and suddenly the production platform in this little project was dragging its feet, and so why is this slow? And it was actually an interesting cascade of things. We had recently put a whole bunch more work on our main production database, which is easy enough to size up. It's a cloud database. You just push the button and say, make it bigger. But we had got to a place where, so we made a read replica bigger, and we noticed that because the load was running high, that embiggening process was not seamless. There was not enough extra resource in the database to allow the database to make itself bigger. And so we watched this update drag out and spike the database CPU for, I don't know, 15 minutes, half an hour. And like the site still worked. It was just super crappy. And this was a very uncomfortable experience for everybody in the room. You know, my platform engineers went scurrying off to deal with it. And the CTO is like, why haven't you done it? Why haven't you done it? Why haven't you done it? And it's like, well, okay, if you look at this graph where we tried it over here, you can see where it would have made the problem worse. So we have to wait for the, anyway, it was super fun. And And so anytime something like that happens, I do two things. I think about how to instrument it better so that we have some advance notice. And I think about how to spend more money just making it bigger now. I like it's very tempting for me to just go through and double the size of everything every time that happens. And then I won't have to think about it for another year until that happens again.
There you go. Let me ask you a question there. Like, how do you see that you know, monitoring and decision making, how, and in fact, your strategy in general, how is that different from, you know, traditional APM? I mean, what are you doing, and, you know, culturally and from a tools perspective, that means that this is observability?
Yeah, and really that's the tricky question, because we have a lot of traditional APM, and then, you know, you think about what to trigger off of and what not to trigger off of, and if you build too much stuff around that, it turns out not the AI market. You may not have noticed this, but we build AI, and this market moves at an insane pace. We deploy fundamentally brand new stuff monthly, like, and we change our mind about the stuff that we're running. So we've got, you know, the services that everybody knows and loves, but the services everybody wants today are the thing that we announced yesterday, and they want it now. So we shove a lot of stuff out the door, and then we think about how to instrument it. One of the things that's helped us shove stuff out the door faster, frankly, and is LaunchDarkly. If we feature flag all the stuff, then we can push it to prod and see how it behaves before it gets loaded. And then we can load it slowly and see how it behaves as we load it. And that lets us, you mentioned earlier about testing in prod, and frankly, you've never really tested anything until it's in prod. You can do all the pre-prod stuff you want to do, but your real customers are going to behave in surprising ways, and they're going to break things that you didn't expect them to break, and they're not going to use things you thought they were going to love. So until you get it into prod in front of some customer, you just don't know. And so feature flagging everything. Like we started with just front end features and the big pieces. And once we started, you know, paying real money for LaunchDarkly, I was on the hook for that. And so I encouraged all the engineers everywhere to figure out how to use this thing to justify the spend. And now that we are embedding it sort of across the platform, like, every day is a new discovery of some cool thing we can do with it, that will keep us from being paged awake at night, and keep our customers from seeing things before we see them. Or at least if customers are going to see it, it's going to be customers who specifically signed up to see, you know, early alpha stuff. And if it's a little flaky, they'll have more tolerance for that.
Yeah, I mean, I'm a big believer that systems, you know, there are some things that should wake us up at night. And that's maybe if we have kids, right?
Yeah. No, my kids are grown now, and I appreciate them not waking me up.
We don't have to deal with that anymore. But yeah, no, 100% with that. So Jay, let me ask you. So, you know, we've heard from JR, and you know, it's a great story, and certainly, obviously, the culture there is very much ready to be shipping all the time. You know, I love that. This idea that people only ship 4 days a week. It's like, you know, I'm not going to say that I like this Silicon Valley obsession with 996. But you know, you're certainly you got to be shipping more than 4 days a week. So yeah, Jay, like from your perspective, I'm really interested in this integration between the observability world and the feature flag world that JR described. And like, what is it A, that you need to build, and B, you know, what are the opportunities, I think, for your customers going forward?
Yeah, it's a good question. So I think we started the guarded releases or guarded rollout product with the idea that a customer could just send a metric, like some number from their system, to LaunchDarkly, and that ends up powering whether we roll something back or we don't.
Mhm.
And while that might seem kind of naive, it actually worked a lot. There's a lot of success in the earlier part of this year, actually, with just that approach, where an application developer on one of JR's teams, let's say, can just add that instrumentation alongside the feature flag, and then if something goes wrong, it automatically rolls back. I think the next evolution of guarded release is like, how can we expose a larger breadth of metrics to the LaunchDarkly platform? So it's not just these simple metrics, but it's things like traces and logs, and even going to JR's example of the database performance kind of stuff. What if we could kind of wrap your cloud environment and actually understand the health of the cloud environment to power these rollbacks? So actually, that's kind of an interesting thing that I was thinking about, JR. Like, how do you think about feature flagging things when it comes to, you know, these simple application front end chains?
Yeah.
Yeah.
What kind of metrics can you consume? Like, can you, if my database is emitting Prometheus metrics, can you consume those metrics and do something interesting with them?
We could, yes.
Because like some of the stuff that loads the database is new feature stuff. Like we do a new thing and customers start uploading 1 million documents to index. And like we don't have an index on that new column or whatever. And so the CPU runs hot, and sometimes, and if it's, especially if it's a thing we've released to some big customer. And so here's a scenario. I release a new feature to some special friends customer. They start using the feature. It melts down my database for all my customers. If LaunchDarkly is consuming my database metrics and it can correlate the spike in database traffic with the release of this feature and unflag that feature for that customer so that that customer is no longer uploading 1 million documents for my poor unindexed database to consume, then the rest of my customers don't notice that anything happened, and I have a conversation with my alpha customer. And we use LaunchDarkly a lot to expose stuff to a small group of customers. And that's the risky stuff. So an opportunity to unlaunch that stuff, or at least mask it from the customers, from the small group of customers to protect the large group of customers, is very interesting to me.
Yeah, I think the big challenge for us is actually, you know, the barrier between the application and the infrastructure. Like for us, it's very important for us to be able to connect a given change with the underlying issue that's happening, right? So the way we do this is with like flag evaluation data on a given service that you're running. And so, JR, if you have a service that's hitting a database and we know that that database span has some ID on it, then yes, we can do it. I think once you start getting further and further from that, it's kind of where actually what we're excited about. And it's like, how can we build defaults that actually do account for that and make it even lower effort for you to use the guarded releases and things like that? So that's, I think I would describe that as like the next vision this upcoming year from a product perspective, what we're thinking a lot about. And today we're sort of scoping this to application level changes. And yes, we do have customers that send, for example, this database related span events and things like that back to the platform.
Okay, that's
I
enough.
look forward to discussing that with you.
Come on, what have you actually got? Let's see this demo. That's enough vision for the future. Like, let's see what you got now, Jay.
Let's do it. Let's do it.
Well, on that note, before we jump into the demo, a little grounding on where this all fits. So, LaunchDarkly is a feature management platform that helps software teams ship faster, safer, and with more control. We're trusted by over 5,000 customers, including a quarter of the Fortune 500 names like Santander, SAP, IBM, and even Autodesk. At its core, LaunchDarkly lets teams manage how and when new code reaches users so that you can experiment, roll out gradually, as JR noted, and react instantly when things may go wrong. Under the hood, our platform is built for reliability. We're the only feature management solution that treats flags as mission-critical infrastructure, powering over 45 trillion flag evals a day with global delivery in under 200 milliseconds and four times of uptime. It's the backbone of safer releases. But today, we're really going to zoom in on one piece of that, which is observability at the point of release, where safety, speed, and insight all converge. We'll look at how guarded releases, error monitoring, and session replay, and even our newest observability AI, Vega, come together to make releases not just controlled, but self-healing. So, Jay, take it away. Take us into the product. Show us what you've got.
Sounds great. I'm going to quickly share my screen here. And we will get started. So I think a good place to start is with the concept of a guarded release. James, JR, and myself were just chatting about that. And that's the idea that on a given feature flag, when I'm rolling something out, what if we also instrumented observability metrics and that feature flag could automatically roll back when something went wrong? So using JR's example of this database type issue, let's say I have a new service that's querying a part of my database, and the types of customers that are using that part of my database are perhaps overloading something and causing a lot of latency. We could basically set up a guarded release that is detecting that latency metric coming from the database. And then when the flag gets automatically rolled back, this is sort of what the screen would look like. So here, for example, it says the rollout was paused with 50% regressions, and there was a user error rate issue. And I can say that I want to actually stop the rollout, or I can continue it, but I basically get a warning such that I actually can make an action on making sure that this doesn't turn into a larger incident. Now, maybe let's think about guarded releases as like a 3-phase project. The first phase is an engineer can just send a simple metric with a number on it, right? Like it's a metric like a gauge metric of 5.0. The second phase of that is what if we automatically attribute these metrics to real errors in my system? And that's what I'm about to show you guys right now. So if I click show errors here, I can actually click into the related error that happened on this given guarded release. And I can see a nice stack trace of that error. We can see it's actually a type related issue with this library Zod, which I'm pretty familiar with. And then I know how often it happened over time, and I know the body, and I can see any of the related resources as well. So like now I know all the related logs that happened to this error related to the guarded release. So the cool thing about this phase 2 part of guarded release is that not only are we auto rollbacking when we detect an issue, but we're giving you full context around the actual underlying issue, around when something went wrong. JR, I guess, any thoughts on kind of how this could be relevant to kind of the issue that we just discussed just now? Well,
so this is super relevant. Like right now, the handoff between engineering and deployment is a Docker image, and our service runs as 100 some odd microservices inside Kubernetes. And so we push these new Docker images or changes to the configs sort of all the time. But the manual step there is we don't automatically push these things because I want an engineer who understands what's supposed to happen to be watching all of our gauges and dials. And I want some customer success or QA people to click around and see if the feature does what it's supposed to do at the time of release. If we can automate more of that so that the engineer or the product person could define what the release was supposed to be done and tie it to observability, then I get those answers right away. If the engineer went off to get another cup of coffee at the time I happened to finish the rollout, I don't have to wait for them to come back. I don't have to keep pinging them. We have tooling that watches this every time it happens, and it correlates the time of everything automatically. And I want that.
Yeah, and I feel like a part of this is also just the proliferation of tools. Yeah. Like most companies have like 4 or 5 observability tools. And I think like a feature flagging tool that understands the underlying observability data points you to the right place.
I just wrote that note down about 3 of my existing tools.
Yeah. So like being able to be pointed to the right type of data to look at, I think is obviously powerful in what you're saying, JR, but I think even from like economical or just time spent switching between things perspective is pretty powerful.
Yes.
I mean,
okay,
honestly,
cool.
there are no organizations that aren't currently going through this discussion, Jay. I mean, we're not talking to anyone that isn't worried about, frankly, the cost of observability tooling. It doesn't matter how much they like the vendor in question. They're always challenged to be like, wait, can we really store all this data? What should we store? Why does it cost so much? Why is it such a significant amount of my budget? And to your point, obviously, developer experience and operator experience, context shifting is a nightmare, and particularly when we're in the troubleshooting scenarios. Look, humans are very good at this kind of work, really. But yeah, if you're trying to deal with 4 different interfaces, giving you 4 different sets of data, 4 different UIs, it's hard to pull that together. So I think that definitely describes the world that we see. But I'm not talking to any enterprises, any startups, any companies, frankly, that aren't looking to do some rationalization in this regard.
Makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
Okay,
everything in a class I can get rid of saves me a context shift, and as you say, it's hugely expensive. It costs time and attention, which are like attention. Attention is a function of time, and it is the scarce resource.
Yeah, not just ingestion and retention.
Yep.
Cool. So I'm going to switch gears a little bit and maybe just talk a little bit about the actual underlying observability metrics that I'm talking about. And then I think we'll talk a little bit about Vega and kind of what we're building on that front. So as I mentioned, we looked into a guarded release that pointed us to a given error. But what if we could look at sessions or logs or traces or any other observability signal? So imagine a world where that exists, and in LaunchDarkly, we can actually look here at Matt's session, for example, and we can play through what he was doing, what he was clicking on, where his cursor was, but then also all the related traces, networks, and network requests and errors that were being fired on that given session. So, JR's example earlier was about a database-specific example, right? But what about a front-end engineer that's shipping new features very quickly, right? They need to be able to also debug the same types of signals for their team specifically to understand the underlying issues. So that's just a quick view of what that would look like. Then we look at more historical or familiar traditional APM metrics, things like logs and traces, where I can actually see the underlying logs and all the attributes, keys, and values that are being thrown under a given guarded release. I can also look at traces, so I can take a look at performance of specific database operations. This goes well with JR's other earlier example. And then lastly, on top of all of these products, I can look at a visualization of them at a high level, kind of more like an APM dashboard to understand what went wrong. So here, when I was showing you guys the error rate that was being thrown on a given guarded rollout, these underlying metrics actually can be graphed in a more sort of free way in our dashboarding product to understand what went wrong if you need to go deeper. And one thing that we're really curious about from a cohesion or like connecting things perspective is actually connecting underlying metrics themselves. So here on a given dashboard, I can actually click on the underlying traces in the dashboard to understand what went wrong. And this is automatically sampled by us so that you're not incurring too many ingestion charges and things like that, but you still have more context under the underlying dashboard that you're looking at. I think maybe now's a good time to switch gears a little bit to Vega, now that I have like maybe 5 more minutes on this demo. So let's take a look at what that means and why that's important. So I mentioned cohesion, and we mentioned tool fatigue, right? The multiple tools that we all have in our toolbox. What if we had a sort of ChatGPT-like experience on top of our observability data, on top of our guarded release data that we could use to actually investigate the underlying issue? Here's an example of what Vega looks like and what this will look like for LaunchDarkly customers very soon. So in this case, I'm actually on a given session replay. You can see it right here. And I asked Vega a question. I said, looks like the user encountered an error boundary in this session. I got an error alert for that. Do you know why this might have happened? I asked Vega the question, and it started doing work for me. It said, I took a look at this session with ID X. This is my investigation plan. And then it goes off and starts querying all the related resources that I would otherwise have to look at myself. So it's looking at all the related logs. This is probably a familiar screen for y'all. It's looking at all the related errors. It's looking at session events, the underlying events that are happening in the session. And then it comes back to me with an actual RCA on what the actual issue might have been. So that's pretty powerful because it's pointing me to the actual underlying React components that caused the issue. It's connecting them to the logs that are happening on the back end because we have all of that piping working really well. And it gives me basically the underlying issue, or at least a draft of it, for me to kind of go into and have some knowledge of before having to jump between 5 different screens and things like that. So that's pretty powerful because I don't have to do any work. And if there's a guarded rollout, imagine that this is waiting for me to act on. The second thing that I'll show is kind of an extension of this, which is beyond just the actual investigation that Vega can do. What if Vega could actually author a code fix in my code base? So here's another example where I asked Vega, can you make a sample PR for me? And Vega actually looked through all the issues. It created a given PR and it made changes and then opened a PR and gave me a link to the actual PR that was on this code base. So the ultimate world in our minds is that when a guarded rollout comes out, I actually get a connection between the change that happened that caused the issue, what the underlying observability data that powered it, and then what code fix could actually make the fix itself. I think that wraps up the demo. I'm curious, maybe James, JR, any thoughts?
How does Vega make the connection between the release and the underlying code?
It's a good question. So right now, it's basically based on semantics. So we look at the underlying log lines that are being printed. We'll look at the session IDs that are thrown. But we don't have yet actually like a release-based connection between the two, you know, like with like a commit SHA or something like that. Maybe that's what
like I mentioned my 100 some odd Docker images, and I'd be interested in tying those to the release cadence so that you could then go to the appropriate Git repository and see what happened in that repository that led up to the creation of this particular version's Docker image that's the thing that I released.
Yeah, that's interesting. That's interesting. In my experience so far, this has actually worked pretty well because it like will look at, you know, like recency.
Yeah.
But in your case, if you have like, you're right, 5 versions of like a blue-green deploy or something running across these containers, then it becomes a little more complex.
I look forward to playing with this.
Awesome.
For me, on the AI side, I mean, look, there are things that LLMs are really not good at, but so much of what we do doesn't today. And I mean, I'm not necessarily going to use them for all of my math problems going forward either. But the some of the things we worry about, the outputs can be non-deterministic. The truth is that with that sort of flexibility, there's a great deal of power, because we very often, if we're dealing with unknowns, being able to, and also a lot of it is what we're doing with these logs, certainly dealing with a combination of that semi-structured data with natural language. And in that world of that sort of fluid world of, to be able to ask those questions with natural language, I think is really powerful. So I don't think you'll be alone here in moving forward with this sort of approach, but I think it's super important, and it will definitely make life easier for JR and other customers. Being able to interrogate the data, super helpful in natural language.
Yeah, like landing me in the neighborhood is, I don't need the last mile. I need the bus to the right neighborhood.
Indeed, and these LLMs are weirdly good at like protocol stuff. Throw some weird protocol that you don't fully understand, and it's highly likely that they will be able to help you to understand what is actually happening at that level. And I think, so that's just a huge advantage, and I look forward to seeing the results, Jay.
Well said, James, and well shown, Jay. So what you just saw from Jay is the heart of it, right? Control meeting clarity. Feature flags gives you that control, but observability gives you confidence. Because it's not enough to know you can toggle a flag. You need to understand why things may have broken and where they're happening. LaunchDarkly lets you pinpoint performance issues down to a single change instead of your entire stack. That's just way less noise and more signal. It's observability that operates at the same speed that you're releasing. And that's critical because every team we talk to is trying to balance speed and safety, to ship fast without crossing that line directly into chaos. But we don't think safety should start with reaction. We think it should start with prevention. The goal isn't to get better at putting out fires. It's to build a world where there's no smoke at all. That's the philosophy behind guarded releases. A year after introducing guarded releases, we built the foundation for full release observability, bringing risk thresholds, full stack monitoring, and user level replay all into one place. We even coined the term guarded release because we wanted a new standard for safe, confident shipping. Every change monitored, every risk reversible. Today, that standard is what helps teams prevent outages before they happen. But we didn't stop there. We've been evolving the model, pushing observability deeper into the release surface and smarter into automation. So Jay, bring us home. What have we been up to on the roadmap side of things?
It's a good question. So I think I kind of hinted at this throughout my demo a little bit, but I'll kind of just give a quick overview of what we're looking at on the observability side as well as the guarded releases side. So on guarded releases, we just introduced a new feature called guardrailed metrics, which essentially lets you auto attach thresholds and a certain set of metrics on a given rollout, so that across your rollouts, you don't have to kind of go out and pick metrics every time. It's also kind of a good way from like a change management or leadership level to ensure that all changes going out have some baseline number of metrics that are being guarded by. And actually, we use this very deeply here at LaunchDarkly. And a lot of our earlier guarded release customers were the ones that kind of gave us this idea in the first place. So that was really cool. On the observability side, one thing that I'll put out there is that we're building a lot of features around feature monitoring. So I mentioned observability, I mentioned guarded releases, but on a given flag today, you can actually see a lot of monitoring related data about error rates, about users that are interacting with those flags. And that's what we call feature monitoring, and is a great sort of segue into the core observability signals themselves. And then I think another thing that I'll put out there is mobile. So for a little bit of background, I actually came to LaunchDarkly via an acquisition 7 months now. 7 months ago now, and we were very focused on web generally. So it was web logs and traces. We focused on all of the major web frameworks, and then we also focused a lot on session replay when it came to the browser itself. Having come to LaunchDarkly, we've gone pushed into a direction where a lot of our customers actually care a lot about mobile, iOS, React Native, and Android. And that's something that we're building towards as we speak. So we actually have in beta an iOS session replay product that folks can use. We're building Android very soon. It'll be out in the next few weeks. And then React Native and Maui and a lot of those other sort of smaller frameworks will follow. So lots of exciting things to come on the roadmap side of things. And then the last thing that I'll talk about is just Vega. So Vega we just demoed here, but there's obviously a lot that we need to do there to take user feedback and work with sort of our early design partners. I'm hoping this is a good excuse for me to get JR to try this out and work with him on it. I got a big thumbs up there. And so, yeah, we're really excited to kind of build against that early feedback and kind of build a roadmap around it. And that'll be an EAP, I think, within the month. So LaunchDarkly customers should kind of keep a lookout, and we'll be in touch on that front. On the Vega side, just to kind of close the loop on the importance of Vega and kind of what the end goal is there. There's 3 parts of Vega. There's signal, sift, and solve. Signal is basically finding the underlying signal that happened when an issue happened. And we get those signals from guarded rollouts, but we also can get those signals automatically, and we can also get those signals from alerts. So there's many places where we can kind of detect whether an issue happened and be able to take some sort of action. The next step is sift, which essentially means that we want to understand the underlying observability data, how it's associated with the given release. JR mentioned that he cares a lot about the actual release that was related to the data, which is important to us as well. But the idea is that you can basically have this agent do a lot of investigation to understand what might have went wrong and understand what the priorities are in terms of the RCA itself. And then the last part is solve. And solve is hopefully pretty obvious, which means that we can actually author a code change, open a PR, so that if you do, in fact, as James loves, shift something on a Friday, and you wake up in the morning on a Monday, you are waiting with a PR in front of you for a fix that can get back to your code base.
This is all incredible. Real talk, I'm so excited about Vega. If you joined us today, you were the first to actually see it in action. Vega helps teams spot what's going wrong, understand exactly why, and fix it for you, all inside of LaunchDarkly. And now early access, like you heard from Jay, it's officially open. You can sign up on our site today and be among the first to get hands-on. We're learning right alongside you, and your feedback will help shape where Vega goes next. And speaking of going deeper, if today sparks some ideas, well, there's a brand new book from James Governor that dives exactly into a lot of what we've been talking about. I want to take a quick moment to spotlight it because it's really special. So James Governor, who you've just heard share such sharp insight on observability and release strategy, he's got a new book coming out this fall from IT Revolution. It's called Progressive Delivery, Build the Right Thing for the Right People at the Right Time. And if today sparked ideas, this book just takes that even further. It's co-authored by Kim Harrison, Heidi Waterhouse, and Adam Ziman, and it captures exactly what we've been talking about today, how to deliver software that's both adaptive and stable, how to balance speed with safety, and how to align your team's users and even business outcomes. The book expands on the foundations of DevOps and continuous delivery, exploring the 4 A's: abundance, autonomy, alignment, and automation, through real stories from companies like GitHub, Disney, and even Nike. It's a powerful framework for anyone who cares about shipping confidently while staying connected to real user value. We'll drop the link in the chat so you can pre-order it or learn more on IT Revolution's site. I highly recommend it. It's the perfect complement to everything that we've discussed around observability, guarded releases, and building with confidence. It looks like we are right at our time marker. If you do have any questions, don't be shy. We will even respond to you one-to-one after the session closes. Any parting words from James, JR, or Jay?
Sure.
No, but that's an amazing job of hyping my book. I love that. I love that. I'm like, yeah, I sometimes, as someone that's a bit English and a bit American, sometimes the British side doesn't want to like blow my own trumpet, if that's the right phrase. That was just amazing. I've got nothing to say other than, yeah, buy and read the book, everybody.
Perfect. And JR, thank you so much for joining us today. James, I know it is late your UK time, so we are super stoked that you all joined us and that you all were the first to see Vega live in action. So welcome to the future of self-healing software. And that's all from us, folks. Take care. Thank you.
Ciao.